You know, when you really stop and think about it, stock exchanges are kind of like the central nervous system of the whole modern economy, aren't they?
They really are. It's where ideas get funded, growth happens.
Fortunes are made, yeah. So today, we're going to take a closer look at the biggest player here in India, the National Stock Exchange, the NSE.
Right. And we've got this deck from May 2025. It's pretty detailed, gives a really good picture of the NSE.
Okay.
So our goal here is basically to pull out the key insights for you, our listener. We'll look at, their history, where they stand now, financials, the whole 9 yards.
Think of it as your shortcut to understanding the NSE. Sounds good. So history first. It's not like super old, right?
No, not ancient. Incorporated in 1992, and then operations started in 94, first with the debt market, then the cash market, stocks.
Okay. But the deck highlights something interesting. It was the first demutualized electronic exchange in India. Now, that sounds a bit technical.
It does, yeah.
What does demutualized actually mean in simple terms? And why was being electronic such a big deal back then?
Good question. So demutualization, it basically means they shifted ownership. Instead of being owned just by its members, like the brokers,
Right.
it got a separate ownership structure, shareholders, more like a regular public company, usually means more transparency, more efficiency.
Okay, makes sense.
And going electronic first, that was a total game changer for India. Imagine going from, physical trading floors.
Shouting in paper tickets.
Exactly, to screens everywhere across the entire country. It just massively increased access, broke down all sorts of barriers.
Right. Fast forward to today, and the scale is just mind-boggling. End of 2024, the market cap, the total value of all listed companies was over 5.13 trillion US dollars.
Yeah, trillion with a T.
That puts it, what, fifth largest stock exchange globally? That's huge.
It really is. It says a lot about India's growing economic clout,
Yeah.
and also just how many more people are getting into the market. And what's also kind of amazing is the derivatives side. For the last 5 years straight, NSE has been the world's largest derivatives exchange by volume.
5 years running. Wow. That points to a lot of activity and sophistication in the Indian markets, doesn't it?
Definitely. It's not just simple stock buying and selling anymore.
So beyond just the size, this deck really digs into their technology. They mentioned 99.99% uptime for their trading systems.
Yeah, which is basically perfect.
How critical is that kind of reliability when markets move so fast?
Well, it's absolutely vital. You can't afford downtime. Even a few seconds can cost, potentially millions.
Right.
And processing over 1 billion messages daily with response times under a millisecond. That just shows you the sheer power of their systems.
And think about the journey. They compare it back in 2001. They could handle maybe 60 orders a second.
60.
Yeah, 160,000 orders and messages per second.
It's almost incomparable, isn't it? It's not just an upgrade. It's like a whole different species of technology.
And it affects the whole process, right? Not just placing the order, but settling it. They mentioned the settlement cycle going from T+3.
Right. Trade day plus 3 days to get your money or shares.
Down to T+1. Just
Right.
1 day later. Why is that such a big improvement for, say, the average investor?
Well, mainly you get your money or your shares much faster. Your capital isn't tied up for as long.
Okay, liquidity.
Exactly, better liquidity. And it also reduces risk, the risk that the other side of the trade might, fall through before settlement. So it's faster, safer, more efficient all around.
Got it. Now, the NSE's influence, it goes beyond just the trading tech, right? The deck mentions their role in the wider ecosystem.
Yes, definitely. What caught your eye there?
Well, they were key in setting up NSDL, the National Securities Depository Limited. Sounds important, like a big digital vault or something.
That's a good way to put it. NSDL is basically the electronic record keeper for securities instead of paper share certificates.
Which could get lost or stolen.
Precisely. Huge problems back in the day. NSDL holds everything electronically, so when you buy or sell, it's just a digital transfer. NSE, helping create that, was fundamental to modernizing India's capital markets, made investing way easier and safer.
Yeah, I can see how getting rid of paper was a massive step.
Yeah.
The deck also talks about NSE EMERGE. What's that about?
NSE EMERGE. That's their platform for smaller companies, SMEs, startups.
Wait.
It lets them list their shares without going through the full, often very expensive and complex IPO process. It's like a stepping stone to the main market.
So helping smaller businesses raise capital.
Exactly. And it seems to be working. By August 2019, they already had 200 companies listed on Emerge. That's a significant boost for those growing businesses.
It sounds like they're really trying to nurture the whole economic pipeline, from startups to giants. And their own structure is pretty broad, too. 19 subsidiaries, 8 associate companies.
Yeah, it shows they're involved in a lot more than just the exchange itself. Things like clearing, technology services, data, maybe even education. It's a wide network.
Okay, let's shift to recent performance. The deck compares Q4 of fiscal year 25 with Q3. What did you see in terms of overall market growth?
The market itself was definitely buzzing in Q4. Let's see. Cash markets up 16% quarter on quarter. Equity futures up 9%.
Okay.
Equity options, a big jump, 21%. And currency derivatives just exploded up 84%.
84%. Wow, huge growth there. And how did NSE's own volumes track against that market growth?
Pretty closely, which is what you'd hope to see. Their cash market volume grew 13%. Equity futures, same as the market, 9%. Equity options, they grew even faster than the market, up 31%. And currency derivatives, up 81%. So largely mirroring the market boom, but actually outpacing it in options.
Which likely helps explain their market share figures. They're just dominant in key areas.
Absolutely dominant. Cash markets, they have about 94.6% share. Equity futures, it's almost a monopoly, 99.8%.
Incredible.
Equity options, still very strong at 81.2%. And currency futures at 93.9%. It really shows their entrenched position.
Yeah, those numbers speak volumes. Okay, shifting gears slightly. Who actually owns NSE? The deck gives a snapshot of major shareholders, excluding promoters and directors.
Right. It lists some big familiar names. Life Insurance Corporation of India, LIC, is a major one.
Okay, LIC.
And then various other insurance companies, an entity called Aranda Investments, Stock Holding Corporation, SBI Capital Markets, and even a prominent individual investor, Mr. Radhakishan Damani.
Right, the founder of DMart. Interesting mix.
It is. It shows broad confidence from big state-owned institutions to private investment firms and successful individuals.
So let's talk products. What can you actually trade or access through the NSE? It seems pretty comprehensive.
Oh, it really is. Under equities, you've got the standard stock trading, of course, but also indices like the Nifty 50.
The main benchmark.
Exactly. Mutual funds, ETFs, they handle IPOs, sovereign gold bonds, that's investing in gold electronically, even a security lending and borrowing scheme.
Okay, quite a bit just on the equity side.
Then you get into derivatives. Huge range there. Derivatives on individual stocks, on indices, including global ones like the Dow Jones and FTSE.
So you can trade international market movements.
Yep. Plus commodity derivatives, currency derivatives, even interest rate futures. It's a pretty sophisticated toolkit for managing risk or speculating.
And finally, fixed income and debt.
They cover that too. Trading in corporate bonds, they have an electronic platform for bidding on debt, and they facilitate government security bidding for retail investors. So yeah, pretty much all major asset classes are covered.
Full service indeed. Okay, let's hit the financials. How did they do for the full fiscal year 2025?
Pretty strong year overall. Total revenue was up 17% compared to the previous year, hitting over 19,177 crores. Operating revenue also up nicely by 16%.
And profitability. What about EBITDA?
EBITDA saw a really healthy jump, up 28% year on year, reaching over 12,647 crores.
28%, wow.
And the bottom line, earnings per share, or EPS, that shot up even more, 46% growth to INR 49.24 per share. Very strong performance indicators.
Definitely shows a growing, profitable business. Where's most of that revenue coming from?
The biggest chunk, unsurprisingly, is transaction charges, the fees for trading. That was over 13,600 crores, up 12%.
Okay.
But other areas are growing well, too. Treasury income up 18%, data center and connectivity charges up 30%, and listing services fees from companies listing up a strong 41%. So good diversification and revenue growth.
However, looking just at the last quarter, Q4 FY25, the consolidated operating revenues actually dipped a bit, didn't they? Down 18% compared to Q4 of the previous year.
That's right. While the full year looks great, that specific quarter saw a year-over-year decline in operating revenue.
Any idea why? Just market volatility.
Could be various factors. Quarterly figures can swing based on short-term trading activity, market sentiment, maybe even regulatory changes affecting certain segments. But it's important to look at the full picture. Even with that quarterly dip, Q4 itself was still very profitable. Total income over 4,300 crores, profit after tax over 2,600 crores. The EPS for just that quarter was 49.2 rupees. So the yearly trend remains quite positive despite that one quarter's comparison.
Okay, good context. So maybe a
Yes.
temporary slowdown in Q4, but the overall FY25 was solid. Now, dividends investors always care about those. How's the track rate?
Seems pretty consistent. The deck highlights a final dividend of 90 rupees per share paid in May 2024,
Okay.
and then another final dividend of 35 rupees per share in May 2025. Shows a commitment to returning cash to shareholders.
Good to see. The deck also throws out some other key stats as of early May 2025, number of listed companies
Yeah, 2,720 companies listed as of March 2025.
and registered investor accounts. This number is staggering. 22 crores. That's 220 million.
It's incredible, isn't it? Just shows the sheer scale of retail participation in India now.
Absolutely massive. And funds mobilized in FY25.
Total funds raised via the exchange in FY25 reached 18.7 trillion rupees. That's huge. Broken down, it was about 4.3 trillion in equity issues like IPOs and follow-ons,
Right.
and 14.2 trillion in debt issuances. Plus, they mentioned 242 IPO listings combined for the main board and the SME platform in FY25. So a very active year for companies raising capital.
Very active indeed.
Yeah.
Now, how does the NSE stack up against its main rival, the Bombay Stock Exchange, BSE? The deck gives a comparison for FY25.
Yeah, it does a side-by-side. Generally, NSE reports higher numbers across the board: revenue, income, EBITDA, profit after tax.
Okay.
But things like EPS or price-to-earnings ratios, those can differ quite a bit based on their respective share prices and number of outstanding shares.
Right, different capital structures.
Exactly. As of late May 2025, the deck shows NSE's market cap around 4.08 trillion rupees, with a share price roughly 1,650. BSE's market cap was lower, around 988 billion rupees, but its share price was much higher, around 7,305.
Interesting contrast. And they provide some global context too, PE ratios for other major exchanges.
Yeah, they list PE ratios for exchanges in Hong Kong, London, and the Intercontinental Exchange, which owns NYSE. It helps you get a sense of NSE's valuation relative to global peers, though you always have to consider the different market dynamics.
Of course. Different growth prospects, regulations, all that. Lastly, the deck mentions the NSDL IPO. That's the depository we talked about earlier.
Correct. NSE holds a big stake in NSDL 24%.
And the IPO got SEBI approval, expected around June 2025.
That's what the deck indicates. And NSE plans to sell part of its stake, about 18 million shares, which is roughly 9% of NSDL.
So that would mean a significant cash injection for NSE, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Selling that stake in a successful IPO would bring in substantial cash, boosting their balance sheet, could be used for investments, expansion, maybe even bigger dividends down the line. It's a significant financial event for them.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. This deep dive into the May 2025 deck really paints a picture of, well, a powerhouse, doesn't it? Dominant in India, a major player globally.
No doubt about it. We've seen the massive scale, the impressive technology.
That 99.99% uptime. The T+1 settlement.
Right. Plus, the huge range of products, the strong financials despite maybe a slight dip in one quarter, and the strategic moves like the NSDL stake sale.
It's clear they've been central to how India's financial markets have evolved, making things more efficient, more accessible.
Definitely. And their focus on tech, on expanding their offerings, it really seems to position them well for whatever comes next.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to ponder. With this NSDL IPO coming up, potentially bringing in a lot of cash, and with finance becoming ever more digital, what do you think are the biggest opportunities and maybe the biggest challenges facing the NSE in the next few years? Something to chew on. It's certainly a fascinating space to watch.